So, welcome everyone to our second Engaged Buddhism workshop. And we're very honored today to have Dharma Teacher Jo-Ann Rosen with us, who will share about trauma-informed mindfulness. And many of you may know Jo-Ann already. If not, I hope you have a chance to look at her book. I've been slowly making my way through it and enjoying. I find every page is engaging. I can just open it and then read a few paragraphs, and just it's a very beautiful voice in the book. And somehow it goes straight to my heart. And maybe that's because I know Jo-Ann already for some time, and she lived here at Deer Park, I think, when she was working on the book. So I'll just briefly introduce Jo-Ann, and then we'll listen to 3 sounds of the bell to start. We come back to our body, come back to our breathing, and then I'll pass it on, and Jo-Ann will take it away. So Jo-Ann Rosen, LMFT, is an educator, psychotherapist, and lay Dharma teacher in Thich Nhat Hanh's Plum Village community of Engaged Buddhism, having joined the Order of Interbeing in 1996. And she is one of the guiding teachers of Embrace, which stands for Embodying Mindfulness-Based Resilience to Awaken Community Empowerment. And I think Jo-Ann is one of the founding members of that group, which is really looking into how we can apply Plum Village practices specifically to situations of trauma. And my name is Brother Stream, and this is also I'm Brother Fablu here at Deer Park. And just to mention that Sarah Lane, our communications coordinator here at Deer Park, also has done most of the work to set up this initiative. So we're very grateful that we can have these kind of gatherings online. Okay, so I'll just invite 3 sounds of the bell to begin. So please enjoy your breathing. You can sit solidly, stably, and relax your body. Let go of any thinking and just bring all your attention to your breathing.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for showing up. Thank you, Tai Faplu, for envisioning this series. I don't know where it's going, but I've appreciated it so far. Let me get my face off of this screen and go back to the rest of you. Yeah, that's much better. I'm so appreciative of having this practice in my life, having Tai and Sister Chung Kam be such beacons for me. And I'd like to begin with the embrace land acknowledgement. In acknowledgement of the land and the land ancestors, I welcome each of us to bring our awareness to the storiedness of the earth under our bodies. May we listen deeply to understand the stories, the causes and conditions that got us here. In reverence and with wholehearted gratitude, we honor the ancestral stream, our known and unknown land ancestors, our spiritual and familial ancestors. May we contemplate the challenges, the gifts, and the responsibilities that have been transmitted to us by all the land ancestors, the spiritual and the familial. May our learnings together on this path grow our ability to be mindfully present, support our curiosity, and to feel truth, so that we may transform what needs to be transformed for a just and equitable future, so all peoples, beings in the earth may thrive and live in peace, belonging, love, and joy. So I come to you with my own roots, my own biases, my own identities. The ones that have been the most prominent for me are that I identify as a woman of working class Jewish roots and have lived rurally for many decades. And I hope that what we can do together today is to have one small takeaway that might inspire you to be yourself, to slip into fearlessness, and to be able to really embody the calling that is authentic for you. And it's going to be a little bit like speed dating, because I had trouble figuring out how to pare down my book from twice the size to what it is, but to put it all into 90 minutes and give you the experience of it and a little bit of the taste of it and some aliveness, started to dysregulate me big time this week. I already have felt kind of dysregulated with the unrelenting heat that hit 117 here for a while, with the things that are happening in Israel, Gaza, and the West Bank, where I've been working and where I have a lot of people that I care deeply about, and the upcoming election. It's been compounded. I'm noticing that I started to have trouble sitting. I could not sit still, even in our lovely morning sangha where they do a guided meditation that's like float your boat, and I couldn't stand it. I needed inside to be yelling or running or breaking things. And so that should have been a clue for me to start taking better care of myself. And it wasn't enough of a clue. So yesterday, when I was preparing for this and trying to figure out how to pare down what I was going to say, my car died. And I was trying to problem solve that and prepare for a wedding coming up at our house. And I could feel my body just getting more and more tense. And then I didn't sleep hardly at all last night. So this morning, it was like, oh, I was going to talk about my activism in the West Bank. I could have talked about working with trauma victims in Chiapas. But really, I was needing to talk about what did I do to help myself today? Because the two exercises that we're going to do together, I didn't have the ability to do myself today. For me today, I had to stick to very, very simple mindfulness practices, watching my steps, feeling the texture under my feet, going outside and feeling the sun scorching my skin, drinking a whole bunch of water. Those were the kinds of very simple regulating systems for this body, because I haven't been able to adapt to unrelenting stress, and I think neither have you. That the stresses are piling up, and in fact, we don't have a nervous system that deals with unrelenting stress. Our nervous system is really evolved to be hunter-gatherers, that it takes tens of thousands of years for our nervous system to even do a little adapting. So what we're doing is we're walking around with a nervous system that's meant for a hunter-gatherer lifestyle, and that's a mismatch with what we live in. So our challenge is to figure out, how do we regulate our nervous system? Because when our nervous system is dysregulated, we're on automatic. We're in threat mode, even though the threat may not be life-threatening, but it feels life-threatening. Even a red light at the wrong moment, when you're late for something, can feel life-threatening. Our bodies are responding as if we're in danger. And when we're in danger, the brilliant evolution of our nervous system is that we go really fast, either to fight or to run away. And you can feel that fight or that runaway in your body as your arms and your legs get more charged, as your heart goes fast, as your breathing goes fast. And where we put our attention becomes our reality. So if we learn how to put our attention to the wholesome, safe islands all around us, which are always there, we can actually calm our body and fool our nervous system into thinking everything is fine. And then our body calms down, and we're no longer in a fight-flight mode. And when that happens, the cognitive, the receptive, the creative, the problem-solving, and the interpersonal social self can come online. There's a very interesting look at a mudra in Buddhism of wisdom of making a fist with a finger and then embracing that finger. This is wisdom. And to me, this is being able to soothe our body so that the threat mode only has a little bit showing. We don't want to get away completely from the part of us that's watching for threat, but we want to embrace it like a baby. And that this part, the cognitive part, comes online. So this is our wisdom. Our wisdom is a balance, an optimal balance between being vigilant, but not too much, so that the cognitive part of us can actually run the show. And that when we learn to do that, we can make decisions that are based on wisdom. So this is called Activism, a Vehicle for Awakening. And I'm guessing that many of you came to this today because you have a concern for the state of our earth, for the state of our human civilization. And even though you may be coming for many, many different reasons, that there's a calling inside of you that wants to help heal the world. And that has certainly been a strong call for me in my life, but it also hasn't always been an intelligent way for me to show up. When I was in my early 30s, I got smitten with the idea of going to stop nuclear power plants and go to get arrested. And I have to say that there was a part of me that was truly worried about nuclear everything, but there was also a part of me that found it kind of romantic to join with a bunch of people and get arrested and go to jail and do the things that we did back in those days. And actually, it seemed like we were being very effective. But what I noticed during those days was that there was a lot of ego showing up in the variety of leaders, and that I wouldn't call everything that happened during those days skillful. I might not want to participate in those anymore, even though the thing that drew me still stands alive in me. But what I notice is that when we're all riled up, this is not in charge, that we're not using our wisdom to create wise action. And why is that? Because we're so unaccustomed to regulating our nervous systems that we're easily manipulated by chaos, by other people yelling or things going too fast, going into meetings where someone's taking over and we don't know how to stop it and we get nervous. And so the very first thing we need to do when we want to be activists is to know that the kind of action that we're doing comes from a wise, broad view. When human beings first roamed the earth, we were these hunter-gatherers, and the hunters were very clever. They were able to hunt so much, almost to extinction, that their food supply began to dwindle. And they were forced to figure out how to make the plants more productive because the animals were becoming very scarce. So while we were clever as human beings, we were clever in the short run, and we didn't have a big picture of what we were doing. And I think that that applies to many, many of the things that human beings have done, so that our short-sightedness, which helps us survive because we can mobilize to danger very quickly, also clouds our ability to see a big picture. Because when we're dysregulated, when we're very highly activated, we're focused very much on whatever it is that dysregulates, whatever it is that is threatening, and we don't see the big picture. And that's been true throughout history, that human beings act quickly, we're short-sighted, and that the intention of our actions boomerangs because we don't see the long-term impact. So how do we do that as activists? How do we see a big picture? How do we see the interbeing nature of what we're doing? Is that we must have this cognitive perspective rather than being all razzed up. And how do we do that? We need to know, one, when we're actually dysregulated, and we can feel that in our bodies. But our lifestyle is so much out there in the world that we're not really in touch with our bodies and the subtle and not so subtle signals that tell us, hey, hold on a minute, you need to bring yourself down. Because actually, the cognitive part must be online in order to be mindful, in order to be curious, in order to see things as they are. So the first step towards mindfulness and having a big picture is to regulate ourselves. And so I'd like to just take a little pause with all my yakking, take a sip of water, because that helps me regulate. And then I'd like for us to have an experience of regulation. So you might want to try a drink of water yourself at this point, but really be present for it. And notice what happens before you drink and then as you're drinking. Just notice what happens in the body. Whew, wow. So get yourself comfortable. And we're going for the optimal balance between alertness and relaxation. That's this. And you might even try going like this and see if that feels pleasant, unpleasant, neutral. Notice how your body is feeling on the inside, like a pre-test. And there's no right or wrong to this. We're just going to spend time noticing. And if anything that we do together doesn't feel right to you, to know that you are in choice, and that being in choice in and of itself can help regulate your nervous system. You need to be lying down, lie down. You need to be standing and moving around, do it. You need to be sitting still or rocking, try it out. You might want to look around and make sure that your surroundings are good enough that if you feel like closing your eyes, you'll feel safe. We're going for a sense of well-being or good enoughness, good enough not to be on high alert. You can say hello to your body. You might not have said hello yet today. You might enjoy taking a deep breath. If you feel a little drowsy, you might hold the breath in, big breath in. And if you feel like you need to regulate down, you might want to just focus your attention on a long, slow out breath. But just notice the impact on your body of the breath. There's no right way. We're just noticing. And if we had enough time, we could notice for a long time. Our toes, our feet, the temperature, the clothes against our skin, the tension in our muscles. But this is speed dating. So we're going to date our body right now with just scanning your body on the hunt for some part of the body that feels good enough, relaxed enough, or maybe even pleasant. It might just be a slight breeze going across your cheek. Or it might be that your knee doesn't hurt quite as much as it did this morning. Just see if you notice anything inside there where you can rest your attention at ease. And when your mind wanders, because that's the nature of the mind, it's always on the alert for safety. Just bring it back to the curiosity of, is there anywhere in there that's good enough right now? Maybe it's the sensation of weight, solidness, where your bottom is being supported, or your feet, or your knees, or your hands. Weight can feel really good. Maybe you can feel your heartbeat in various parts of your body. Your throat, your chest, even your arms or your fingers. Just noticing how this process of noticing our bodies is affecting how we feel inside. And then knowing that you could really spend a nice half hour or 45 minutes doing this. If you feel like venturing into a different kind of well-being, to bring to mind something that is almost always guaranteed to feel good. It might be the image of a dear one or a place that you enjoy. An animal companion, a piece of music. Well-being comes in so many different shapes and sizes. Bring to mind just one thing that has the quality of well-being without any bittersweetness. And bring it to mind in detail. What you see in your mind's eye, or perhaps what you're doing, what sounds might be there, what thoughts go with it. To ask yourself, what are the very best parts of this? What makes this sing for me? And as you make an attempt to re-inhabit that memory, to notice how that impacts the body. Is there anywhere in the body where you feel that sense of well-being? Even just a little bit. Just one breath worth. And if you're noticing something pleasant or even neutral or relaxing or good enough arising inside from this sense of remembering, might consider putting a hand on that part that is responding to your images. And to hold your attention there as you are watering the seeds of well-being, as you are greasing the pathway, strengthening the neural pathway to this particular flavor of well-being. And to know that the longer and more frequently you visit this very place inside, the easier it will be to access this sense of well-being to help regulate your nervous system. And maybe as you do this, you notice a word or a body movement, a gesture that feels like it encapsulates it, or maybe it's just one little image that helps you remember it. Perhaps taking a deep breath in and knowing that remembering this can remind you to revisit it at another time. And that just as you have savored this experience, so too can you create a lifestyle where you are watching for these moments, slowing down enough to savor them right when they're happening, and knowing that you can continue savoring them even when that time is past. These are watering wholesome seeds. This is foundational to our practice. Right effort waters wholesome seeds and calls them up at will to water them some more. So, taking perhaps one or two more breaths. And allowing the sound of the bell to accompany a sense of well-being. So ideally, we would have another 15 minutes to pair up and to share with each other our sense of well-being in this particular circumstance. And I want to encourage you to do that with someone after the show. And just see what it's like, to see if you can bring that sense up, because chances are that as you share your story of well-being, you will see as you light up, the person who is listening lights up as well, because we are built to mimic each other's emotional states, which is a very, very key quality to know about, because when we're in their company and they're agitated, we can either become agitated ourselves if we're not aware that they are kind of bringing us to their emotional state, or we can do things to self-regulate, which helps them to come into our sense of well-being. And you can read about Sister Chung Kong realizing that when she was in a boat and could hold a calm presence for boat people in fear, that the whole boat began to co-regulate with her in her solidity, in her calm. So this is something you can take into a meeting. And when things are really getting stirred up, you can be aware, my body is being stirred up. I'm getting out of what's called the window of tolerance, or as I've been calling it, the window of mindful opportunity. It's knowing your body so well and staying in touch with it that when we become dysregulated, we know it. And we use tracking our body, bringing up mind states that are of well-being, finding grounding, or even gestures that help us calm our bodies so that we can make a big difference in a meeting, even if we don't say anything. But if we can say something, it depends on the tone, the body of how regulated we are as to the way those words will impact. So this is already activism. To be in community, to be at work, to be in a movement, and to be solid, to be kind, to be compassionate. Each of our well-being states can be developed by sitting with them, watching for them, practicing them when we go to sleep, practicing them when we wake up, sitting on the cushion. And what is metta? It is bringing up these wholesome well-being states and sending them out. And then we can do the same thing in our meetings. We can do the same thing in our families. But sometimes we care so much, and that the things around us are so painful. They can be so ugly or disruptive that we can't handle those feelings. And so with the foundation of watering those wholesome seeds comes the second step in what Joanna Macy calls the work that reconnects. That the first step is to inhabit a sense of well-being. The second step is to be able to handle pain for our world. And that there's so many varieties. So that we learn a skillfulness of being able to bring up difficulties and wrap our mindfulness around them. But we don't always have mindfulness to wrap around unwholesome states. So it's really important for us to know, when are we grounded and when are we not? When is it the time to begin to handle difficult feelings, to put ourselves in difficult situations? When do we have the capacity not to be carried away? And that comes and goes. We need a lifestyle where we are guarding our senses so that we're not overworked, we're not overwrought. And then we have the resilience to take on the right amount of pain and work with it. So one of the things that occurred to me is that we're going in and out of the window all day long. How close to going out can we be without going out? And we can kind of develop our muscles of taking on bigger and bigger feelings and still being okay enough to inhabit our wisdom. And I liken it to the roasting of a marshmallow. You know, you can take a marshmallow and you put it on the stick and you stick it in the fire, and then it turns to flame, and what you have left is a yucky black, ashy mess, and nobody wants to digest it. But if you take that same different marshmallow and hold it closer to the fire so that it just begins to brown a little bit, and then pull it away, and then maybe turn it and take a different face of the marshmallow and come back close and then go away, then we begin to see the marshmallow is melting. It's becoming something delicious, albeit perhaps not very healthful. But for the metaphor is that you're much more likely to enjoy it. And so the same is with difficult feelings. If we notice that there's a difficult feeling arising, we don't have to just focus on the whole thing and become overwhelmed. We can take a little bit of it at a time. We can go through it one skanda at a time. Our body, we can notice, where did this affect my body? And not so long like, okay, be aware of how your heart is beating. Oh, my heart is beating hard. But if I watch it for a long time, my heart is beating hard and it starts to beat harder, then that's an indication that's enough. Pull your marshmallow away. Only let it get brown, not to be overcooked. So we go back and forth between our states of well-being and our putting our marshmallow closer to the fire, being able to sit with a difficult emotion just a little bit, maybe just noticing something in the body, and then going back to a part of the body that feels solid or that feels good enough. Or maybe you bring up one of those wholesome well-being states, like I bring up an image of my dog. And she's just like so cute and fuzzy, and I kind of go like this. And I can feel my body regulating enough so I can go back and see, what am I telling myself about this difficult situation? I can go to what's an image that comes across my mind. I don't have to do it all at once. I can take the body sensation or an image in my mind or a thought, and I can just be there for long enough to learn something, to be there with curiosity. And as soon as that curiosity can't be maintained, we go back to that sense of well-being, whatever it is. And we need to do it when we know we have the capacity not to be carried away. So I want to invite you, if you feel like you have the capacity, to bring to mind something or someone that you have a sense of concern about. And to start by remembering the exercise we did a few minutes ago, where you had a sense of well-being, whether it was in the body or in your mind. And just remember that that's where you're going to go back to as you bring up this sense of concern for something in your life. So again, get comfortable. Maybe you want to hold your wisdom in your fingers. start with a sense of well-being in body and or mind, not that those are separate. And then allow a sense of concern to arise, to tell yourself what it's about, and just notice if there's something that happens in the body when you bring this concern to mind. Just be curious. When I'm in touch with my concern, what happens in my body? And then go back to that sense of well-being that you were playing with in the first exercise. And just notice, just be curious. Maybe nothing happens. Maybe something happens that's surprising. And then go back to that sense of concern. Again, noticing what happens in the body. Maybe you notice something different. Maybe something has changed from the first visit. And again, go back to the sense of well-being, the same or a different one. Then perhaps going back to your place of concern and notice what you're telling yourself about it. Just notice a little bit and then back to the sense of well-being. Do it in your own rhythm. Going back and forth, stretching yourself a little bit to notice what is your concern made of, and what is that like to experience it. It might be noticing anger or fear or grief. And continue to come back to the sense of well-being as a refuge as you increase your ability to be with your concern, to be with your fear, to be with your grief. To really see what it's made of. This is developing fearlessness and courage. Little by little, depending upon your own capacity. And always ending by sitting with a sense of well-being. to take some cleansing breaths, letting out whatever needs to be let out. Maybe to hug yourself or put a hand on a heart. And taking 2 more breaths. In order to see clearly and accurately, we need to be able to handle the difficult feelings. We need to be able to look at a situation and to be able to feel fear or sadness or anger in a way that does not carry us away, so that we are not acting out of those fears and angers and griefs impulsively, but that we are able to collaborate with each other, to share our knowledge in a way that creates really wise action. We need to be able to become intimate with those things that we care about. And so often we either run away, we distance ourselves because it's so painful, or we jump to action because it's so painful. But that distancing or jumping to action doesn't actually produce the kinds of results that we hope for. So the first step is being in tune with the body and knowing how to regulate it. The second step is knowing how to handle the pain so that we can really become intimate with the situation, see what it is made of, in order to have intelligent action. And then what do we do around intelligent action is that we need to have some guidance, not only with collective wisdom, but with an ethical compass. And in our tradition, I think we're incredibly blessed to have the 5 and the 14 mindfulness trainings as real guidance into how to act in a way that incorporates the biggest perspective possible, that we train ourselves to have the insight of interbeing, which means many, many, many perspectives. Perhaps we can't get all the perspectives, but we can certainly get more if we can come from a place of curiosity and mindfulness rather than reactivity. And Sangha is really a living laboratory for how to practice with kindred spirits to get the kinds of skills that we can then go out into the world and be in relation to others perhaps who are not on this path, but who have similar concerns, similar commitments to the environment, to social justice, to supporting others. And for us to be able to relax into not being swept away by our difficult feelings, but to be motivated by our caring. That being able to handle our caring in a regulated, mindful way is a gift that will guide us, along with the trainings, into what to do that's wise action. I was going to talk a little bit about moral injury, that today many of us find ourselves caught in participating in activities that perhaps go against our own internal ethical compass. People in the medical profession who have only 10 minutes to be with too many people all day long and can't deliver the kind of caring that they were trained to deliver. Teachers who are forced to teach things or forced not to teach some things or lose their job and can't provide the little caring that they can provide for their students. They're suffering moral injury. Certainly, people in the armed forces are suffering moral injury. They're in situations in which they're going against things that are deeply embedded, that they feel are not wholesome. And this is a kind of trauma. And it's actually a kind of trauma that we probably all suffer to some degree. So we can't escape difficulty. We can hone in on the things that are the most important to us and develop our sense of well-being enough to handle more and more difficult feelings so we can become intimate with that which we care so much about. And from there, join with others to figure out what is right action. And by right action, we're not necessarily saying that right action always results in the results you want to see. But it does result in a sense of integrity with which we fortify ourselves. That a sense of integrity, a sense of being able to handle more and more situations. We don't always have to be there. it can be one time where you muster the courage coming from your stability to speak up, and it changes something. We're humans. We're all working against what we've created as humans. Both our downfall of short-sightedness and our cleverness of knowing that there's a path that we can actually begin to sculpt our nervous system in ways that are more beneficial, both to us individually and the collective. That's a reason for celebration. That's what our path is about. Whether it's doing it in a great big way, as a politician or an environmental Nobel Prize winner, or as someone who can just turn to a child in our family and say, I see you hurting, without reflecting fear or anger or disappointment. Those can be equally life-changing. So we have some time left, and I would like to first ask Vivian, are you here?
I'm here, Jo-Ann.
Can you say anything that you think I should have said? Because, and I want to highlight this, I depend on a lot of other people. I'm sitting up here in the hot seat, but really, I don't have it together. And I depend on a collective to make a better presentation. And so, Vivian, what would you add, or what do you want me to speak to that you think would be beneficial at this point?
Thank you, Jo-Ann. And I just wanted to reinforce that, it takes a collective. So as Jo-Ann and I were communicating today, and Jo-Ann was sharing her experience of her life and what she was going to speak to, I thought how powerful, that we use our own practice, we use our own immediacy to really reflect how attending to our nervous system can make such a powerful impact, not only for us, but for those around us. So I'm just so grateful for that. And I was noticing how you really led us through a number of practices that can be very useful, including the beautiful pendulation or titration, which is, that thing that we do where we're going to the edge of our difficulty and then going back to our zone of well-being or resources. And so I'm curious if there's questions from our community, if that's where you're going next. But from where I sat and from what I enjoyed and benefited from, I felt like you led us through some very wonderful practices and ways of thinking about our nervous system and what we face on a day-to-day basis, including in those personal moments. So, and I'm seeing Pete is doing hearts. So thank you, Pete, for that. Yeah.
Well, what you're saying reminds me that these are not new practices. All these practices are part of our lineage, but I'm seeing them with this little neuroscience kind of lens. But the Anapanasati Sutra, the one that Tai said when he saw that was made him light up, that he was the happiest person in the world. that follows the same trajectory as these exercises that we've been doing today. And so does trauma therapy, follows the same thing. And so does the engaged Buddhist practice. It's done as an individual, it's done as a collective, and that the Sangha as an organism has a nervous system. And the nervous system of that Sangha can be regulated or dysregulated. And that it's more than the sum of the individuals, but that every individual is feeding into the regulation or the dysregulation of that Sangha, of that group. So maybe with that, we could take a couple of questions. And if, Sarah, you could pin or whatever you do to make us both be on the screen at once, the person who's posing the question. Or it could be a comment on your experience of either of the exercises or anything at all. Just bring it on. I think it's being recorded. And also I'm committed to sending out some notes about things that I couldn't pack into the time we had together. So you'll get that too, along with references to embrace and offerings of embrace. Are there any questions or comments that people like to make? Jessica.
Hi there. Thank you so much, Jo-Ann, for your presentation and just these gems of wisdom. And I was wondering if maybe you could share a moment when you were in a space of activism and you utilized some of the mindfulness tools that you taught us tonight.
Well, for sure, let's see. I don't know if this is what you're actually asking for, but I was in Haifa and I was working with a group of Palestinian Israeli citizens. And there was one woman who was very slightly disfigured by having picked up a bomb that hadn't exploded when she was a child. And she had a very, very bad self-image, and her family wasn't very accepting of her. And she was feeling like she would just be married off to someone who was not very desirable, as the tradition is in her family. And we gathered together, and the women talked about what their resources were, what the sense of well-being, where does it come from? And this woman said she likes to dance. So immediately we put on music We put on some kind of belly dancing music, and the women all came alive. And one by one, they danced in the center of the circle. And this woman took a turn, and she was a magnificent dancer, magnificent. And so we danced for a while, and then I said, okay, stop right now. Notice what's going on in your body, because they had already been trained to go back inside and be able to bring this sense of well-being and savor it, and that was a transformative moment for her. And not only for her, but for all the women in the way they saw her, because she was the embodiment of joy. And she said she felt beautiful. And so that became a moment that she could savor, and that she savored it throughout the month-long training we did. And that every woman could co-regulate with her joy, because they could see her beauty coming through, because they were co-regulating, and so they felt it as well. And so not being afraid to stop everything when something is happening that's a moment to savor, and say, wait, stop. Let's all say, that's what we do with the bell. These are bells of mindfulness. We're training ourselves to go back to ourselves with the bell. And so we're just looking for more bells. We're creating a lifestyle of more bells. I also have to say that one of the things I do to regulate myself when I'm doing something like this is to watch for faces that are getting it, that I think are getting it. And you happen to be on my screen. And so when you came up, I thought, oh, wow. I'm appreciating being able to connect with you directly, because I've been kind of riding on your attentiveness during this time together. So thank you.
Jo-Ann, we have some questions in the chat. I know Jerome has raised his hand, but I wonder if you...
Can you just read a couple of them?
Sure. So I'll read a couple and then you can see which ones you'd like to answer. So
Yeah.
Jack asks, how do you use intention to help overcome suffering?
Hmm.
Do you want to hear a couple more?
Yeah.
Okay. And Donna asks, I'm an engaged photographer who goes to rallies in support of Palestine, for example. I find this work quite dysregulating. 1 hour of photographing a rally takes me out for at least 3 days, maybe a week or 2. I feel guilty because I'm needed often.
Okay.
And then the last one that I read so far is Andrew asks, how do you decide on which small steps make a change, especially with such worldly large problems? Thank you for these thoughtful questions.
Wow. Well, we can't necessarily program what's going to come up as a wholesome or difficult moment in our lives, but we can program practices that strengthen our intention. So if you have an intention, you can sit with that. You can ask, what is this intention made of? And you can use that like a caring. You can parse it. You can, what goes on in my body when I set this intention? What am I telling myself? What is drawing me about this intention? So that you become intimate with your own intention and you savor the wholesome parts of it. And if your intention is to go in and document something as a photographer, to spend some time going back into those moments and seeing what about it is difficult. To be able to be curious about your experience. And if you're only able to go in and be dysregulated, maybe you need to do some work on how you go in beforehand to know what kinds of supports might you need. What are you telling yourself? And, you know, perhaps there's other approaches. Have you talked to other practitioners who do similar kinds of work? But to use that sense of difficulty like we used the marshmallow, the pendulating back and forth, but only when you feel like you've really got the capacity. And perhaps you need to be spending more time watering those wholesome seeds, looking for issues of well-being. Perhaps you want to document some things that are well-being, people who are calm in the crowd. I don't know, but I think that there may be different approaches than the one you're using. What parts of it are dysregulating for you and what aren't, and to really sit with that, but only when you have the capacity. So how do we know which things, where we should put our attention? Perhaps our life is going to serve us up the direction that if we become more fearless and intimate with our environment, then something's going to grab us enough. And perhaps it doesn't, we don't have to find the perfect thing. That we're developing our skillfulness by being engaged. That's like our carrot. And if we genuinely care, then maybe there's no right place. Maybe there's no best thing to do. But I think that for me, anyway, I need to see, I'm not an astute politician. I'm not young and agile and can go out into demonstrations. What can I do to make a difference? Is I can support people's nervous systems. That's where my strength is in this moment, and that's where my calling is. I feel called to do this. I feel called enough to be dysregulated in this experience with you for 90 minutes, you know, because I care, because because I know that this has helped me, and I've seen how it helps others, so that fuels me. And something is going to fuel you if you get intimate enough with it, and you'll get intimate enough with it if you can handle difficult feelings, and you'll be able to handle difficult feelings if you stay resourced by watering those wholesome seeds. There's always enough well-being around us. There are enough conditions for happiness. Where have we heard that? This lineage was developed by someone in the fray of it. And this was developed by someone who was experimenting with what worked for him. And then he had the fervor to try and pass it on, and he couldn't do it alone. And look what we got.
Thank you so much, Jo-Ann. This is, we could all feel your heart in this presentation. I really felt, I think we all felt so deeply your love and your care for that, just to take this time and to share what's worked for you. It brought me back to last fall when you're in the science retreat here, a couple last year, and also I think the year before, 2 times, yeah. And just this very simple presentation of Thich teaching, which is really getting us into the heart of what we're finding in neuroscience. So thank you.
Well, thank you for the opportunity, Tai. And thank you for the vision that you embody, the carrying it forward. So we dedicate the merit to finding our well-being, our courage, our caring, so that we can pass on the merit of our own practice in all the 10 directions, so that every being, every ocean that holds our tears, and every sunset that holds our awe can sense interbeing, feel harmony and peace and liberation.
Thank you, Deer Park. Thank you, Jo-Ann. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you,
Thank-
Jill.
Thank you, Jo-Ann. Thank you, Deer Park.
Thank you, Jo-Ann.
Thank you, Jo-Ann. Thank you, Deer Park.
Thank you so much. Thank you.